Talk with Teddy starts now. You picked a topic, I picked a guest. Remember, like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube page, Facebook, and more. You're listening to Talk with Teddy on WLFE DB Radio Network. Please check out our website at WLFE-DB.com. All right, it would help if I unmute the mic, right? All right, everybody, welcome to another version or episode of Talk with Teddy. I do that on occasion because I forget about it because it doesn't automatically come off. But anyways, I'm sitting here with a couple gentlemen, a couple friends that are in the metal music genre. This is stuff they love, and as young guy, I was into some of it, not all of it. These guys are diehards, and that's the best way to put it, I guess. And so, there you go. So we're actually going to start right at the top. Right next to me is Mr. John, the Vernomatic Verno. Welcome to the show, John.
Teddy, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Hey, not a problem. And right below both of us is Mr. Metal Forever Mark. How are you, sir?
Hey, Ted. Nice to reconnect with you, even though we're in this virtual world. So thanks for having us. This should be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I was telling John earlier that I have some questions for you guys. We're going to talk about different types of music within the metal genre because I get kind of confused of what is considered metal and what isn't. And hopefully you guys can learn me a few things. We'll say it that way. Learn me a few things.
You got it.
That's right. So we're going to settle in here. I'm actually going to start a watch party on my Facebook page so y'all can join us on that as well if you can't find another. Hello, Mr. Robert White. He says that if you weren't in this virtual world, then you would not be seeing me in Australia. Exactly, sir. So that you guys can see what he posted. It's right there. He says if you weren't in this virtual world, then you would not be being seen. Oh, would not be being seen in Australia. There you go. I messed that up, but all right. So tonight is all about metal, and I put this out on the airwaves a couple days ago, and it seems like I got some good responses. So I'm really happy about doing this for you guys. So are you two all set? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Good.
Same here. I'm good. Double thumbs.
So I'm gonna do them a favor. If I can get this started back up. I did a couple things to kind of make them feel at home here at my thing. So on my show. So I kind of teased it with John the Vernomatic Verno, and now I'm going to do it for Mr. Mark. We're gonna do this for you guys.
Live from the studios of J. Wolf Productions, Metal Maniacs around the globe unite. Prepare for Metal Mayhem ROC. This is the show where you, a metal musician, a metal maniac, or a new fan of the genre, can be interactive and participate in the show. Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno and Metal Forever Mark.
I did that for you guys because I figured it would be fun. I got some of your other sounds here with me just as well. So let's get right into this because I want to know. So I have about 20 questions that I've written out here, and the first question I have, and you can decide who wants to go first. But when did you know that metal music was for you? When did you know that?
Mark, you go first, buddy. Honors, age before beauty.
Oh,
when did I know metal music was for me?
Yeah.
Well, when I graduated from, now we all have our heavy metal skeletons. When I graduated from the...
I don't, just so you know. I don't.
Well, I graduated from, I was into Barry Manilow and soft rock. Well, I was like 8 years old.
Okay.
And,
All right. I'm starting to feel sorry for you there because
No.
I'm not a Barry
And-
Manilow fan at all.
It was in 5th grade, and I got into Kiss. I saw Kiss, not in concert, but I saw Kiss, Gene Simmons, and heard Rock and Roll All Night. This is when, in 75, when Kiss Alive 1 came out, and that was the start of it.
Right. Awesome. I love Kiss. I wasn't in the beginning. I wasn't a huge fan, but some of their songs get to me. Beth actually was one of my favorite songs of all time. But let's move on to Mark. So, what was it for you?
So the answer to this question for me is really, really easy. And Vernomatic probably knows this guy that I'm going to reference real quick because he's a Penfield chief.
Share this.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay,
have
cool.
my.
I just want to make sure you can hear what I'm saying. Okay, so real quick. So bottom line is Scott Batiste, who's a Penfield friend of ours when I was a kid growing up, we used to go on ski weekends together. And the rule was half the car ride, his parents got to listen to whatever they wanted to. And then the other half, we got to listen to what we wanted to listen to. And I remember the parents were playing like really strong classical music, like opera and classical. And I was like, this is brutal. And then I couldn't wait for us to switch over. And what Scott was playing, he was playing British Steel. And at the time, that's a Judas Priest album. And at the time, I didn't even know what heavy metal was. I wasn't really a music fan like the Vernomatic. I guess Donna Summer was my very first album, as well as the Bee Gees. And I don't know if it was because I don't know if it was because no matter what came after that classical opera music would have sounded amazing to me, but whatever it was, I just really, really liked it. And for a long time, I was confused. I thought British Steel might have been like a band, and then I didn't understand the difference between like British Steel and Judas Priest. And so then I kind of started figuring that out. And then around that time, Screaming for Vengeance came out, and that's when like Another Thing Coming was on the radio. I remember getting that CD, or I think at the time it was a record, and I put that on from the very first track, and I think that just kind of did it for me. And then that kind of opened the doors. And that guy Scott Batiste happened to be a really big metalhead, so he started turning me on to all kinds of bands like Saxon and Motorhead and Megadeth, and so then it just, I think that's how I got enlightened. So the bottom line for me was it was because I was listening to 45 minutes to an hour of classical music, and then British Steel came on after. So, but it always resonated. And then the last thing I'll share on that is I had a cousin. My mom went to go visit a cousin in Connecticut one time, and she came back with a whole bunch of tapes, and it was everything from like Foreigner to Molly Hatchet to Ted Nugent, stuff like that. But then there was metal in the middle of that. And he's like, well, some of this stuff you might not like because it's kind of heavy and it's metal. But that was the stuff that I loved. And I didn't like the other stuff as much. So that's kind of how it started for me.
That's awesome. There was a lot of, I got another thing coming. I remember that song vividly. It was one of my favorite. Probably the only song that I really, to be honest with you, know from them, only because it was on the pop charts. That's where I listened to the music, and that's where I figured out what I liked was the pop charts. I didn't listen to like CMF or anything like that to hear the heavier stuff. If that's where it was being played at, I don't remember. But I just knew that there was certain things about certain songs that I liked, and Another Thing Coming was one of them that I loved the song. And it was same with Kiss, what was Kiss had a couple songs too, something New York Groove,
it was Ace Frehley's solo song.
Yeah, I mean
from the solo albums, and Detroit Rock City, Rock and Roll All Night.
Yep, that was one of them. Yep. So for me, learning what heavy metal was kind of, I guess I only heard parts, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't always something that I heard. So if it wasn't on the pop charts, if it didn't cross over, I guess I didn't hear it. It was one of those things.
I have a question for you. What pop chart was Another Thing Coming on?
That's a good question. I tell you what, though, that song definitely went mainstream because it was definitely on the radio. And I even remember them playing that song at our 8th grade dance. But if that's a quiz, I don't know the answer to if that charted.
I don't either.
Where that would have been.
Did you watch MTV back in '82?
The problem with MTV is MTV was cable based, and I didn't have cable back then. So
Oh, okay.
with the only time that I saw anything different or wasn't like what my parents bought, as in records or not 8 tracks, the other one, cassette tapes, or anything like that. It was when we went to the store and we bought them. It's like we would say, "Oh, I love this song because I heard it on the radio," and that's how we bought it. Speaking of, records are now making their way back, and so some of these old records that we've had hidden in our closets, of not just heavy metal, but some of these other bands. I mean, yeah, well, look at that. Yeah. So is this stuff that you had, or is it stuff that you had?
Yeah, this is stuff I dug out of the vault, but I got boxes of this stuff laying around. So I did go out and buy one of those record players that you could play digitally, and then through like computer speakers. So
That's
it's actually
awesome.
kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to see that they're coming back around, because now people can empty their closets and garages with all that stuff, and hopefully they'll make a big comeback where people will buy them.
Well, there's I just read an article yesterday. The gap between CDs and records are closing again as streaming has overtaken all platforms. So it's the novelty of the vinyl, because it's become popular again, but streaming's outdistancing everything, unfortunately.
Right.
So,
right. Well, we're advancing, and this is where things lead. This is where it goes. We're all going to be. I don't know, with this whole COVID thing, I'm wondering if we're ever going to get out of our houses again, to be honest with you, and go back to doing what we normally do. I mean, it's been playing hell on everybody, so.
Ted, one other interesting thing is I grew up in Rochester, and then I moved away for a long, long time. And when I moved back, aside from Heavy Metal Bob's record store being open, which was really, really awesome to see, Record Archive, has sustained all those years. And when I first went back into Record Archive, I was like, man, it's amazing. You guys have kind of stood the test of time. And I guess the House of Guitar is the same. And I guess Alana, who's one of the owners there, told me, that there's this resurgence of vinyl really helped their business. I don't know if it was 2-3 years ago and it started becoming trendy again, and people just like the purity of the sound. So I guess that's what makes Rochester kind of a unique old school kind of rock and metal town, where some of these stores like that are still able to hang on. It's pretty cool.
So Chanel Fletcher joined us, and she says, "I still have my original record player too. It weighs 75 pounds and it is portable."
Hilarious.
and what kind of metal does Chanel jam on that?
Yeah, I'd like to know, what were you listening to, Chanel? What kind of records did you buy back then? I found a record that I listened to when I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure you guys know the band, but some people will go, "Who the hell was that?" Rare Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Rare Earth was one of those bands that I got the record. I don't even remember where I got the record from, but it was the Big 33 1/3, and I used to listen to that all the time.
Well, Ted, this is a great chance for us to do a plug for Metal Mayhem ROC, our podcast that Mark and I do. I just put the finishing touches on a 3-part series on the old Lakeshore Record Exchange. And they were vital in the early and mid 80s Rochester metal scene, from bringing in import records to starting a heavy metal weekend radio show to promoting shows up until the late 80s. So look for that on metalmayhemroc.com, or there you go. That's where you can find us. So
right.
a lot of we've been talking vinyl for me and Ron Stein, the gentleman that ran that. He eventually sold it to another guy that took Lakeshore Records. He had it up until the late 2018. Then he eventually sold it and closed. But so as long as we're talking about that, there is a history in Rochester. Another thing, the Record Archive last year won Independent Record Store of the Year down in Dallas. Wow. And they really have a hell of a thing going on. And Mark, what do they have on every first Tuesday of the month? A metal night?
Yeah, they have a Metal Mayhem. I think it's actually called Metal Mayhem. It's a Metal Madness night, and it's the first Tuesday of every month. And sadly, of course, with all of us being quarantined right now, that hasn't happened for a couple months. But that'd be cool. Maybe maybe we'll talk to them about doing a virtual one because they got some momentum going for that. And they they had some live bands sprinkled into it as well, which was pretty cool.
Well, there's
Chanel.
Sorry, yeah, there you go.
A Little Accept, Hammerfall, Metal Church, and Ozzy. Mark, Ted has some of our drops all queued up.
Oh, maybe yes, I do.
Maybe we can have an audience participation going on here with Chanel.
I'm a big Hammerfall fan too, by the way, and Vernomatic. I'm trying to turn them on to some German metal, so they're definitely
Hammerfall. Aren't they a shoot off of Hammerfall from old Celtic Frost? Or Hammerfall's an old 80s band?
No, I don't think they've been around since the 80s. I would call them probably since the early 90s, at least. We can do some fact checking on that, but and I don't know their roots. I don't know their spin off of their of where they originated from. But Joachim Kahns is a really amazing singer, and Oscar Drojnak, I think, is the guitar player. I just think they're just classic, good, straightforward metal. So I really like them.
All right, so I love it, Chanel, because I do listen to his stuff. Rammstein. Yeah, so I want to say here, while we have the opportunity to, a shout out here to the people that are popping in and watching us tonight. It's always good to say hello to them. So, of course, we have Robert White from Australia here. We have Chanel here as well. We're going to start back out. We have Tom Nally, Michelle Millins, Ernie Atwell, Grant Gaskin, Scott Wells, Robert Clark, Steve Beck, Patricia. Man, I don't want to torture your last name, Patricia, so I'm just going to say Patricia. I don't want to torture that one. Mike Clark, Christopher Ayers, and we're going to stop there for now. And you guys know how that works. I throw a couple in there, and we have, let's see, Tom Daly says, I remember being a metalhead as a teenager. We would always look down on those that listened to the pop hard rock stuff. As I have gotten older, one of my guilty pleasures has been the hair bands, LOL.
Well, hey, that's the big thing. I was talking with my girlfriend the other day. The 80s, the hair bands came in the second half of the 80s, and they wrote songs about partying and good times and what was wrong with that. So this gentleman got in. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different wing of metal.
Right, Tom. All right, so Chanel said Hammerfall came around in 93, 94.
See, I said early 90s, did I not?
There you go. There you go.
Thank you, Chanel. I just checked that.
Okay, so before we go too far, I want to get a couple more of my questions in here. I want to know from your childhood, what band, what band or artist actually, and now I think we got Mark's because, he was into, his Judas Priest and all that stuff. But what about you, John? I mean, what was it for you? What band?
Well, like I mentioned, Kiss was the gateway, but that quickly went into Van Halen. And Ted Nugent, early AC/DC. This was all in the second half of the 70s. I remember back in the summer of 1980, my buddy was jamming AC/DC. And that's right when Highway to Hell came out and Bon Scott had died.
Bon Scott, yeah.
And then Back in Black came out, Sabbath. Back then, these bands were just coming. We were discovering them daily. And that was the heyday, the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. So to answer the question, Kiss, Van Halen, Ted Nugent, Rush. Yeah. I also had an older brother that was 4 years older than I am. So obviously I'd be going through his records and picking up like the Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush, Molly Hatchet.
There you go.
Molly Hatchet.
Yeah. Iron Maiden too. Iron Maiden was around that time, I believe too, wasn't it?
Maiden started in 1980, but Maiden. I actually, I remember I heard Judas Priest breaking the law on the radio, and I went to the house to get started. See another song,
I know. I was just like, wait a minute, I know another one.
You probably know 10. But I went to the House of Guitars to get Finished Steel, and I bought Stained Class by mistake. And so I get home, I rip it open, I put it on, like, hey, where's breaking the law? But staying class is all priest is great. So
Cool.
And Ted, you touched on this real brief, and I know you have a whole bunch of questions you want to get to. But to Vernomatic's point, right around when heavy metal was starting to really get popular, it coincided for sure with when MTV got popular. And I remember they used to have that top 10 countdown, and this was kind of going back into when I got into college, like 1988 type time frame. And I remember we would always rush home from class, throw on MTV, and I would say of that top 10, almost always, I would say 8 of those were probably heavy metal bands, right? Like,
yeah,
Striper, Def Leppard, Cinderella, like it was just dominating. And even though those were the catchier, poppier tunes, and in some instances like the ballads, like Dawkins, like Alone Again, it still showcased what these bands were. And then for guys like me, you're like, man, and then you go back and you listen to the full album, and you're like, that's where you kind of get introduced to it all. So it kind of was all happening almost right at the same time MTV came out. And I think that really, I think if you talk to metal historians and guys from bands, they'll say that LA vibe, American heavy metal, really was driven by MTV. And then that also coincided when the British bands were coming over, like the Priests and the Maidens and Sabbath and Ozzy. And that's where the whole thing just kind of really just...
Well, they were pumping out hair bands like crazy. I mean, it was one after another. It was like they were just running them through the machine and they were popping out the other side. That was for the longest time. But music, the music industry does that. They did that with country. They did that with pop, and they did that with the hair bands. I mean, it's just what starts making money is what they put their interest into and say, nope, this is what we're pumping through right now.
Yeah,
and, so
it fizzled right out.
Yeah, it did, but they all have their time and place. So I mean, it's pretty cool. But I want to know when you two met and how did you guys meet?
Mark, I'll let you take this one.
Well, it's interesting actually because John and I, while we went to the same high school, I always kind of knew who he was, and I'm sure he kind of knew who I was. I was actually friends with his younger brother, who was in my class. And Mike, and now Mike's not a metalhead at all. And I was like one of those interesting kids, I guess, because I had my metalhead friends that liked metal, and I kind of hung out with them on occasion, and I would go to some shows like Maiden and stuff when they would come through town. But I didn't always hang out with them because I also love sports, and I played sports myself. And I was kind of one of those like weird kind of in the middle kind of kids, I guess. But I don't think John and I ever were really in that same metal circle per se. Maybe we went to a show together, like with Phil Dan and Darren Sapir and some of those guys that But the point is, so we didn't really reconnect on all of this until I moved back to Rochester almost 3.5-4 years ago now. And I'd known that he was into metal, and every people I bump into like, oh, Mark, you got to reconnect with John because he's still a huge metalhead and he still goes to shows. And I think I bumped into you at a Megadeth concert. And so, it was kind of really weird in a way, I guess, because we kind of knew who we were growing up. I wouldn't really say we were friends back then. It was kind of like we reconnected when I got back, and it was through metal, Cool. And then we could talk about this road trip to Canada. that one.
Well, I was, I think I'm 3 or 4 years older than Mark, but I have a younger brother and a younger sister.
Right,
so,
right.
And Mark has some siblings that were in my sister's grade, and we came from a town that was really close. We went to school in Penfield, so everyone knew each other, and I certainly knew Mark. I knew a lot about Mark. He was a Colts fan. I knew where he lived. Sort of like a Mark stalker.
Yeah, I was just going to say somebody was stalking somebody.
Yeah. But obviously I was older, so I was into metal earlier. And then when he got into it, it was just a respect thing. He looked up to me and my buddies, and we had a lot of the same friends. So it wasn't like I never knew him. And like Mark said, I graduated, I took my life path, Mark did his. And it was 3 or 4 years ago, they had a class reunion. And my brother said to me, he's like, hey, I ran into Mark Washer with a class reunion. He asked about you, wanted to know if you're still in the metal. And I'm like, well, you told him yes, right? He goes, yeah. And I said, well, I got in touch with him because I like to go to shows alone because you know how it is. People are difficult. I'll go with people, but I'll get my own ticket and I'll drive myself. And so what Mark was talking about, we connected and we were going to go to a Judas Priest concert the opening night of their Firepower tour in Scranton. But there was a big storm moving in, and at the last minute, I bailed out. I'm like, listen, we could get there, but I got shit to do the next day. So I can't afford to be snowed in Binghamton for 2 days. So we took a pass on that. But then about a month later, Mark got some tickets to a Judas Priest show in London, Ontario. And we hooked up. We went. And I remember he had a big stack of CDs. I had my Sirius boombox to, jam tunes. And we just just chatty Cathy the whole way there. Just, that 4-hour trip went like that, and great show. And, and so we just bonded and started talking about, hey, we should, both of our experiences. I have a history in radio broadcasting. That's what I went to school for. I hosted a metal show back in high school that was on public on WBER that gained some success.
Was that Metal Mayhem?
It was Metal Mayhem, the original Metal Mayhem.
My God.
If people want to Google that, Google Metal Mayhem WRHR. There's a 9-minute video that I did for 12th grade film study. It was the Vernomatic and the Cheech.
Okay, so just so you know, I had I'm trying to remember which guest it was at the time. And he mentioned that he went to the same place to work in oh God, who the hell was it? He was just on my show not too long ago. And he wanted to see who was in this Metal Mayhem ROC. And I mentioned you, and he looked at it, he says, no, I don't think that's him. But now I know it was you because so I have to remember who the hell it was and reach out to him and say, yeah, it was, because that's amazing. That's how I knew it was Metal Mayhem, because he was in BOCES, and they took him to this. He remembers the drive, he remembers going to the radio station, he remembers the Metalhead. I mean, you guys had a whole bunch of stuff that you did, and you guys were able to run the radio station yourself. God, I remember. I wish I could remember who the hell it was.
And if anyone wants to visit metalforever.com or Metal Mayhem ROC, we have a podcast of me and the guy I did the show with, Cheech. We had a reunion podcast about a month ago. We talked about how we conceived the show, sold it to the administrative powers that be, and ran with the show for a year until we went away to school together in Canada for recording arts. And we gained a lot of success with it. We busted our ass. And so when Mark and I started doing the podcast, that's where the name came from. It was like Metal Mayhem ROC. And here we are.
Well, I am actually going to look here real quick to see if I know what it is. But I did want to throw this up before it went. But this was back to what Mark was talking about with MTV. Headbangers Ball. Tom was saying he remembers the Headbangers Ball.
Ricky Rockman. Ricky Rockman was the original host.
Yeah, and Iron Maiden, Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth. Yep. Chanel brought up Donkin, like you guys did. Rat. Let's see, over here it was Rat and Pantera, Def Leppard, Poison. I mean, they're mentioning them all here. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Hey, just one more thing on that road trip. That was the trip that John had mentioned to me, that he used to be in radio and had a metal radio show, which I thought was really cool. And then I kind of told him, I said, hey, I've had this metalforever.com website. I mean, I started that thing like way back when websites literally first came out. When I first started Metal Forever, it was a P.O. box. And I would literally hand out flyers and postcards at shows, because there was a point in time when grunge kind of started coming into the scene, and all the metal bands started falling apart, and they started making non-metal music. And I was legitimately concerned, like metal might just go away. And being a huge fan, I was like, man, I got to do something about this. So, and I just said, hey, I kind of got this platform. I haven't been doing that much with it. I always thought it'd be fun just to go because I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable on the genre, and so that was another cool thing that happened when he told me that he used to be a radio host, and I was like, oh. And then, of course, lo and behold, I found out about your all studio because I had to pick up some equipment from the Dawkins show that John Winters had in his studio, and I was like, wow, you guys have a podcast studio in this place, pretty cool. So it was kind of those random circumstances that put the whole thing together, which was pretty awesome.
Right. No, that's cool. I'm trying to think if maybe it was
Hey, Chanel swearing about old Rat. I've got this one.
There you go.
Chanel mentioned Rat and Pantera.
Yeah.
I love Rat. They're one of my favorite bands. They're very underrated, I think. And when they say hair metal, that really offends me for them. And the fact that they're doing a Round and Round Geico commercial, I know it's cool and it's the song they're most known for. But when people bring that song up as it relates to Rat, I'm like, there's 40 more great songs besides that one, I think. So anyway, Pantera is kick ass. I mean, John, we never talk about Pantera too much. Maybe that's another band we should tackle at one point because there's no doubt they're in that grain of great metal bands, the roots of heavy metal.
By the way, I figured out who it was. It was Billy the Kid from WBEE.
Billy the Kid from the Beat?
Yeah, Billy Hendricks.
I don't know Billy Hendricks.
Yeah, he was he's the one that mentioned that. Yeah.
Well, he probably did the VoPro program like I did, but I was probably older. Oh. After we started Metal Mayhem, and then we graduated, and for the next 3 years, it turned into a class show. So there's other hosts.
Oh, so it stayed around for a while. Oh, okay.
For 3 years, it should have gone off. We should have dropped the mic.
Right.
It was very territorial. But then I wanted it ended, and they said it was the powers that be. It was, when the Vernomatic Behind the Music comes out, you'll hear the whole story. There's a problem going on there. So Queensryche. All right, Chanel's gonna do our Mount Rushmore tonight. Slayer.
She's into it, man. She's definitely into this.
Who's the girl that just mentioned Slayer?
I went down the Slayer rabbit hole the other night.
That was Linnell Compton.
Linnell Compton. It was the fall of 1986. I was going to school in Toronto for recording arts, and Slayer's Raining Blood album came out 10 days before it came out in America, and they started the tour in Toronto. I saw them at the music hall, and it was just insane. And I've been a fan ever. I was a fan when I was in 9th grade when Show No Mercy came out. So I've been into Slayer since the beginning. But what Slayer do you like? What was her name? Linnell. I like all these metal chicks. You got metal chicks on Talking with Teddy. I like it.
Yeah, Ted, you didn't tell us that, man. We would have done it like months ago.
Sebastian Bach, sweet guy with no one else in the room, doesn't like fat chicks. LOL.
Yeah.
Oh, Chanel, you're a card. So I'm going to back up a little bit because, when we were talking about how you guys got all into this and stuff. What was your favorite concert back then? I mean, did you guys go to many concerts when you were younger? And if you did, what was one of your favorites?
We went to concerts all the time. My first show was Ted Nugent in 1980. My late father, rest his soul, wouldn't let me go to concerts until I was 13. So, yeah, I know. You know how many shows I could have gone to? So
you're only 13, John. Come on.
I took my youngest son, I took him to a Metallica show. So my first show was Ted Nugent, 1980. Good. And back in the day, back in our high school days, there was concerts like every Saturday night. It was like going to the movies. You go down to the War Memorial. Hey, you're going to see Aerosmith Saturday. Hey, Rainbow's playing. Hey, Def Leppard's playing. So it was the touring landscape was a lot different than now. Saw all those tours, all those bands in their prime. I know there's times Mark is a little envious, but a lot of those shows that was my period. Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance tour, Iron Maiden. It was Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. It was just, like I said, these tours were like going to the movies.
Right.
Yeah.
Mark?
And Ted, to John's point, when I hear him talk about some of the older school shows he went to, and even back to like Penny Arcade days, I was like, man, that was kind of before I got enlightened into heavy metal, I guess, as the saying goes. But my very first concert, I'll never forget it, was Def Leppard, Crocus. But I loved I loved the Headhunter album. I went and bought the album 2 days before the show because I wanted to know the songs. And that's kind of when I also knew I was more into metal, because I liked that album way more than the Def Leppard stuff. And then I remember going to see the Defenders of the Faith tour at the War Memorial. That was my first pre-show, like big production, like just in your face kind of stuff. But then I didn't go to as many shows as you did, Vernomatic, because like in high school, I don't know. I remember one time going to an Iron Maiden. They did a live, I think it was Power Slave tour. They actually showed it in a movie theater. And I remember going and tailgating for that thing. Yeah, but like Vernomatic, when I started really wanting to go to shows, like I did, I usually went, like when you're in the high school, it's easier to find groups of people that want to go to shows. But then when you get out of school, for me, I didn't know that many metalheads, and therefore I would go to shows by myself all the time. And actually became a preference of mine, because I'm like, hey, just go. Buy my ticket, grab a beer, hang in the back, watch the show. You don't have to talk. You can't talk to anybody during the show anyway, because it's so loud and crazy. But then that's a different little topic. But along the way, I did meet some really cool metalheads that like I'm still friends with to this day through going to shows by myself. But so anyway, I did go to my handful back in the day, but I didn't go to nearly as many as Vernomatic. And then as time progressed, I just started going by myself.
What's funny is you brought that up, and it is one of my favorite bands from when I was younger.
Crocus.
Yeah.
Nice.
I saw Crocus when I was younger, and
great band.
Yeah, Jesus. I don't sit here and think of myself as a metalhead guy, but it's amazing what bands are kind of like in that genre, because people say to me all the time, well, that was a glitter band, that wasn't a heavy metal band, and I don't know the separations, but I hear that stuff all the time. But Crocus, to me, one of my favorite bands was Slaughter, and then there was, of course,
Rushmore,
AC/DC, and I also loved
Nice.
White Lion, and then I don't know why this happened. I think it was because of the one hit. I think they only had one hit that actually resonated with me, but it was Elda Nova. So, that was it for me. I mean, I liked certain songs and certain bands, and I think it was the song that gravitated me to them, not everything else.
The imagery of heavy metal, because there's a lot of imagery in it. But if you really listen to the heavy metal, a lot of it, like I mentioned earlier in the show, it was a lot of, it was exciting. It was usually fast with hooks, and, they weren't really, no one ever confused a lot of these metal bands with like ELP or some of those prog bands of the 70s. It's like, they start it, they get going, and it's just fun. It's just fun.
Yeah.
My take.
And John and I, Vernomatic and I, have this segment called Fire and Ice, where we kind of take a either or kind of approach, or we'll have a metal debate segment. And we talked about like a band like a White Lion, where, again, definitely lumped in with that hair metal genre. Some say maybe they're more poppy rock than they are metal. But then the reality is, even though their MTV songs, what they got known for, and some of their ballads, if you go digging way back to their early stuff, and even that Pride album, which became really popular, there's just some really heavy rocking stuff, great riffs. Very melodic. Like when people talked about hair metal and that's all they were was an image band, it really bothers me, because I think Vito Bratta, their guitar player, like for example, is one of the best guitar players in metal. So, we've talked about the good and the bad, that comes with commercial success in that manner.
I
like your list, Ted.
Huh?
Good list. I like your list. Pretty cool.
Well, it was just one of those things. Like White Lion, I mean, they had an acoustic album that I bought. I loved it. I sat and I listened to the whole album, and I thought it was fantastic. And Slaughter was just, I don't know if it was the lyrics to the songs. I don't know what it was, but they didn't seem heavy metal to me in some ways, you know. To me, when I think heavy metal, is like that really freaking heavy shit where they're screaming in the mic. You can't understand what they're saying. Uh, that's what I think heavy metal is. Um, like the stuff that we're talking about, I don't consider it heavy metal. I consider it more like, to me, rock.
Well, if you want to make an analogy, heavy metal is like different kinds of beer. You could have light beer that tastes great, or you could go way in the
Less
back.
filling.
Yeah, go way in the back, get a German stout lager. Where, you can't have a lot of them, but
Right.
one or two, it's really good. It's the same thing. That's the way to look at it. It's
Right.
just, and then it's personal taste, it's preference, it's experience. It's, we a lot of times we hear these songs just like the type of music you're into. You hear that song and you go back to 10th grade. You go back to wherever it was. And just a lot of this is that time of your life where you couldn't get enough music. And that's what we used to do. Back in our day, you would get the album, and you would put it on the turntable and you would read the album. You would read the lyrics. You would read the back. You would read the credits. And you just consumed all of it. And that's what's getting lost in today.
Right.
Where it's you bought it and you took care of it. And, like Mark, I wish I had every album that I ever had. But I love Wasp too, Chanel. Saw them with Slayer and Raven in Toronto that year that I lived in Toronto. So,
Hey, Ted, so sorry. This is an interesting subject in the sense that there is and I don't know how many metalheads are aware of this, but I'm sure that they are. So there is a film company. They're called Banger Films, and they had this awesome documentary series which talks about all the different. They explore all the genres of heavy metal, and they have like this cool flow chart. Metal fans should search this up. I won't read all of them, but I'll just go really quick. I mean, they've got early metal, power metal, new wave of British heavy metal, progressive metal, glam metal, pop metal, doom metal, thrash metal, Norwegian black metal, Swedish death metal, metalcore, new metal. I mean, man, there must be 20 genres within the subgenres within the genre of metal, right? And some metal fans love it all. Some metal fans only like little segments of it. I should email you that little graphic because it's pretty cool. Maybe you could post it because that is a good question when you say what defines heavy metal. Like, John and I were like, well, Van Halen, are they really metal? But they're somewhere in the middle of that. Like maybe, maybe not, right? So, but anyway, it's amazing how many subgenres of this one genre exists.
Yeah,
might be more. Like I don't know, like how you would say country music. Like, are there? I'm not a country music, so I don't know. Are there 20 subgenres of country? I don't know.
I gotta chase up here because you guys think I'm a country music fan, and yes, I sing country. That's I like some of that music, but I'm not a diehard country music guy. I'm not. Believe it or not, I'm a writer. I'm a singer-songwriter, and the stuff that I write is world or alternative. I actually write alternative music. So I listen and read and write more of that stuff, and that's the stuff that I really love. And so country was just because, I had the opportunity to work in a band, and that's what I sang. And that's what they needed at the time. But I also sing AC/DC. I have nights where I'm out with a band, and that's what I'm singing at the end of the night is AC/DC. So, AC/DC is my rock band. They are the top of the line, the cream of the crop for me. That's my band when I want rock. So wanted to clarify what I listen to and what I am here a little bit. So
Cool.
So what else you got on that question sheet? I'm curious.
Well, I know you are because I told you I had like 20 questions. So music from let's just say the heavy metal from say the 70s and 80s and 90s versus what's out there today. Is there still a heavy metal new type band out there that interests you, that is something that you guys could get behind?
Yeah. There's a million bands. It's just the problem. This is my take on it. The problem now is before, back in the last 30, 35 years, the music industry was different, where you had to rise to the top to be to get a record deal and get out there. Now any band can make a CD or a digital release in their bedroom.
Right.
It's so easy to do it, and there's just so much out there, and there's so many streams to get it. Not streaming services as much as platforms to receive music, and there's just so much there. But there's many new bands. Mark and I are always trying to research, find out what's hot, what isn't hot. It's tough.
Yeah, and Ted, this is one other topic that we talk about a lot, I guess, when we do our Metal Mayhem ROC show, is that Vernomatic and I both agree, like we want to be able to bridge the gap. Like we want to bring all of our old school knowledge of the history and roots of heavy metal and all the stuff we know about the old school bands to the forefront. But we also are looking for that, and for me personally, like that younger, new generation heavy metal band, because I believe firmly that there's still a quality of person or younger kid that metal is going to resonate with because of whatever life circumstances or how you're feeling, because it resonated with all of us. And so for me, like bands like Five Finger Death Punch, Avenged Sevenfold, I guess you could argue, or some of the newer younger.
I've heard of the one.
Yeah, we're big. Like Cobra. I turned John on to Cobra and the Lotus, for example. Even though they're now 10 years old, they haven't been around for only a couple of years. But I'm always looking for that new, fresh, up and coming, young, hungry band. Kids in their 20s that have the same passion that a lot of these bands we're talking about had back in the day. And I'm kind of hoping the old guard brings in the new guard. And like in any industry, that's kind of how it goes. Like even in sports, right? Like the older guys will start bringing in and mentoring the younger guys. So I think the older generation, maybe of bands, and maybe this COVID thing, when they're locked in more, maybe they'll think about it more. But kind of mentoring and bringing up that next generation, because there is a big gap right now. And I think a lot of us old school metalheads are like, man, where is the next Iron Maiden, AC/DC, Metallica? There's not one that's apparent on the horizon.
Well, I'm going to bring this. Sorry, John, but I'm going to bring this up because I know that I was with you guys, or around the time where you guys were doing Dio. You guys were talking about a guy from Dio not too long ago, and I have two people here that just brought that up. Didn't you do an interview with somebody that played with Dio, or you knew of Dio? What was that?
We promoted and brought the band Last in Line to Rochester. Okay. And Last in Line was the members of the original Dio band that released the first three Dio albums. Vinny Appice, Vivian Campbell, and the late Jimmy Bain. They formed a side project after Ronnie James Dio passed away called Last in Line, after one of Dio's solo albums. And so we brought them to town. That was the band we had at the studio up in Ontario. So it was the guys that recorded those classic three Dio albums.
Yeah, I just knew there was something. Yeah, I just knew there was something. They mentioned Dio, and I remembered something clicked, that you guys did something or whatever. So yeah, what else were you going to say, John? Because I cut you off, and I hope you remember. I was just going to say,
there's like the cool thing is, I've gotten into some new bands when some of the bands, like I went to a Megadeth concert. I went to up in Niagara Falls, and they had a young band called Havoc open up, and I never heard of them, and they're from Colorado, and they're on the tour, and they impressed me so much that I went out and got the CD, and now I follow them, and they just released their fifth. I've seen Iron Maiden, and they bring bands like Trivium out with them, and Avenged Sevenfold. So what happens is, a lot of the older bands, they bring the newer bands, obviously, to help make it a more rounded show. Right. In terms of sales, bring the younger kids. And it's sort of like the same thing Mark and I try to do with the Metal Mayhem show is, we're into the older stuff, try to entice the older metalheads to get into some of the newer stuff, and some of the newer kids and people to understand what it was like back in the day. Because it's very heavy metal and hard rock. It goes back to the 50s, 60s. The 60s, not so much heavy metal, but this rock and roll. It always just another layer of heaviness gets on it. You know, back when Sabbath, it was 50 years ago. Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, these bands started 45, 50 years ago. And that's hard to fathom. Judas Priest is celebrating 50 years of, that 50 years of existence this year. But so that's what I was just saying. It's just there are new bands.
Yeah, so I'm checking it out. Like, there's a conversation in here about Rainbow. I've never even heard of the name before. I don't know, what if that was a heavy metal band or not, but I've never heard of them. But that's cool.
Rainbow was Richie Blackmore, the guitarist of Deep Purple, guy that wrote "Smoke on the Water."
Yep. Okay.
He left Deep Purple, and Ronnie James Dio was the singer. So that's when Dio got his big break. And then that band was around for like 4 or 5 years, but Dio did a couple albums. Then he joined Black Sabbath. Again, you need Mark's heavy metal tree to understand all this, but it all intertwines. So Rainbow's a band from the 70s, but they're composed of vintage metal people.
Okay. Yeah, they're not metal per se, but they've got metal roots, and because Dio was in the band, and then they had a really popular album when the when all that MTV stuff came around. So sometimes they kind of got lumped into that metal genre, I guess. By the way, I found that graphic and I posted up on my Facebook page as well as the page from the chat. So when you get a chance, we can check that out. But all good.
For the girl that commented about she likes these obscure bands, I haven't heard of either of those two. Okay. So maybe
I guess it's something you can look into.
Yeah, are they?
What were the band?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Die Artwood and Little Big.
I've not heard of either of those two.
Well, I'm going to put it on my to-do list, Linnell. Die Artwood and Little Big.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to go on to the next question. In your opinion, because, we're talking 80s with the rock and roll, the hair bands and all that stuff. Watching them today versus when you first saw them or heard them, what do you think about them? Do you think they still got it? Are they still jamming away? Are they bald now instead of all long hair? I mean, because you get older, things happen. But I want to know your feel and your take on how the bands are today from yesteryear. To watch them.
Mark.
Yeah, actually, we had a segment on this. Do they still got it from one of our Metal Mayhem ROC shows, and it was around the M3 festival, and we had talked about kind of different bands. Do they still got it? Do they not? And I think, Ted, to your point, there's first of all, when you look back at the older videos, all the bands when they were younger, a lot of these guys were in their late 20s, early 30s. There's just so much more energy, and there's just so much more, rawness going on and jumping around the stage more, and they're singing better and all that. I would say it differs greatly from band to band current day. I've seen some bands that I'll go back to like Judas Priest, for example, where you have a younger guitar player now who replaced KK Downing, Richie Faulkner, I think is one of the best, and Rob Halford, who keeps himself in incredible shape, quit drinking 30 years ago and, always on his game. But then I've seen some other shows where you're like, okay, maybe they should hang it up. Or, some different artists, like I heard, and again, it's not to pick on Motley Crue, but and I heard he got more fit, but I think Vince Neil on his solo tour last go around wasn't looking so fit and singing too well. Now they said that he was changing that for the new tour that they were going to do, that stadium tour that obviously suspended. So it varies greatly from band to band, I think. And Vernomatic, I don't know if you agree or disagree.
No, everything you said is correct. I agree with that. A lot of what goes on with the bands this is it. That's all they know. And part of the blame, if there is blame, is these bands tour, but the audience, it's a Saturday night. They're going to go down to Darien Lake. They're going to see whoever. They're going to have some beers. It's the Shed tour. So, You know what? It's capitalism. Are they
The
in the hay?
Shed Tour? I need to know what that means.
That's what they call the Darien Lake venues of around the whole country, sheds.
Oh, because they're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I get it.
it's like they tour 3 or 4 months a year. They do 30, 40 dates. It's usually a package bill. And it's the soccer moms and the retired lacrosse dads. They go there, it's not the Vernomatics and Metal Forever Marks that are there, because we're much more comfortable getting into like a seedy club to see a band that's, still has fresh power. So it sucks because, I saw these bands for $9-10 in their prime. And but that's just me.
And even like when we brought Doc in here last year, some of these bands also don't really have all the original members anymore either.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Right. And some of the players are younger. Like Dokken came twice. The guitar player that he normally has, John Levin, wasn't available, so they brought in Ira Black. Ira Black's younger, and he's a great shredder, and he's got all the energy like any young guy. Does Don Dokken still sound as great as he did in the 80s and 90s? Of course not. But does he sound strong enough and perform well enough where you're hearing all of your great favorite songs? I would say the answer would be yes. And that's why when some people were critical, especially on social media, go figure, people are negative, right?
Yeah. Like that never happens.
Yeah, kind of a break, man. Sorry he doesn't sound like he was when he was 25. I mean, but that's
life. I mean, come on, I'm seeing in the chat here that there's something going on where they're talking about Guns N' Roses to me isn't metal. It's a wild hair band. And this is Chanel's comments, and then she comes back. She says, "Come on, look at Slash, great guitarist, but wouldn't make it in any other genre." These are definitely Chanel seems to know her business. That's what I'm saying. And then she puts up here, Pat Boone switched to rock and failed back in the day. So,
but Pat Boone did the heavy metal Christmas albums. So.
Chanel, I think these two are fans of yours now, I think.
Well, the comment on what she's saying, again, you have to circle back to different levels of metal. And hair metal really, in my interpretation, really was born the day Poison came out. Because Motley Crue, you go back to the beginning of Motley Crue, they came around in 1981. They so much it wasn't about that poofed out hair as much as the shock value of them. They're a combination of Kiss, Alice Cooper, with a sliver of punk to them. But when the mid-'80s came, 1986, when Poison came out, just blatantly looking like, not like New York Dolls transvestites, but just the really hot. They look like models.
I love the way you say this. I love the way you put it.
Well, that's when hair metal and those bands ran with it, with the hair and the, but it was short-lived. Stryper is a great band. Stryper is an excellent band. Commenting on Elizabeth or the other girl.
Yeah, Elizabeth says Ted Nugent was her $10 band, $10 band. It was fabulous.
Yeah, Ted Nugent. That goes back to when there was concerts all the time.
Yeah, I remember the concerts because I did go to one. Like I said, I've always been a fan of AC/DC. When they came to Rochester, I think it was 2000 or 2002 or whatever it was. It was way back when. I remember the concert got canceled. We were actually in there. I was enjoying the concert, and they actually shut the concert down. But, I loved AC/DC live. And I thought they were rocking. One of the other bands I had the opportunity to see was Rush, but I never got there. And I think Rush is another one of those bands but they were always to me, Rush was always up here next to AC/DC. I mean, a 3-man band, they were so talented. They did all this shit that was just awesome to me anyways. And I really loved their music. I wasn't into Poison. I wasn't into Motley Crue that much. But I do remember some of their songs.
Poison and Motley Crue, that defined the 80s of excess.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what it was. Rush came around in the early 70s, and they were a hard rock band. They came from the 60s. They were into Cream and Zeppelin, and then they went prog. Rush was never heavy metal.
Yeah, I
would say most metal fans respect Rush, and I think most metal fans would kill the chance to go see Rush. I only got a chance to see him twice.
Right.
And everybody knew Neil Peart was like one of the best drummers. So there was a lot of respect, I think, for a band like Rush. And then just to comment quickly on Guns N' Roses, Guns N' Roses came out at a really weird time because right when they kind of hit the scene with Appetite for Destruction, and they were definitely heavy, aggressive, but they were also kind of stripped down. Definitely not, even though they get lumped into hair metal, some would argue they kind of started pushing away from that because it was more like aggressive metal versus, cheesy glam, ballad stuff. But then that was also when that grunge movement kind of started. So they were kind of that weird tweener band that many would argue in the 90s then, when the 90s started rolling around, kind of started, metal bands started not knowing what to do, what kind of music to put out. They started putting out weird stuff that didn't really go true to their roots. Like Dokken went down a weird, offshoot hole. So did Cinderella. So Guns N' Roses, some would argue, was part of that grunge movement that, in a weird way, that kind of started really messing with metal in general, because they might have been the beginning and the end of the hair metal scene, to be honest.
I just know that when I saw him on MTV, I think it was, because I did get to watch MTV at one point, when I saw Guns N' Roses, when he came out, it's like, what the hell is all this freaking movement shit? And I was like, all right, so to me, it's like, just stand still and sing your shit, but apparently he couldn't. But he made a name for himself. Axl was, I love his voice. I mean, he had some great songs,
Here's a heavy metal fun fact. After they did that video for Welcome to the Jungle, that was the last time he ever had his hair teased.
Oh, no kidding.
Because he hated it. Yeah, he hated it. It was John Rodabaugh. Here's a good friend of mine.
What metal or hard rock band do you hope uses this break to write some new stuff? Keeping my fingers crossed for a new Megadeth.
Well, John, thanks for joining in. John Rodabaugh, he's a good friend of mine, and he was playing with a local band called Multitude. So they
never heard of them.
No, well, they're a fun band that they were a parody of 80s metal bands.
Cool.
Glam Multitude. So, new Megadeth, Mustaine and Ellefson, they're writing, and they hope to have it out by the fall. Dave Mustaine overcame the cancer scare. He went through his treatments, and they were working on it down in Nashville. And there's a band that Dystopia, their release 4 years ago, was fantastic. So thanks for coming in, John. Hope things are well. You and your girl.
Well, a lot of bands are saying that it's easier nowadays than it ever was before to record virtually and remotely. And even though some bands were doing it, like I remember even Dokken saying way back in the day for Back for the Attack, where they were always just mailing stuff to each other. They weren't really ever in the same room when they wrote that album. But nowadays, with being able to share files electronically, and like I know Judas Priest had posted recently that they're experimenting with that. I know Metallica talked about they're starting to write stuff. So my guess would be you're going to see a ton of new, I guess that'd be a positive of this whole thing, where these bands, you hope that they're going to get creative again and just start writing all kinds of crazy new stuff. And so that it would be interesting to see what happens as a result.
That's cool.
Well, to comment on that about doing it remotely through files, that last Ozzy album was entirely done that way. And none of them were ever in the same studio. But Nick Muley has a question. I know he did mostly horror rock, but would you say Alice Cooper also played a big role in metal back in the 80s? Of course. He came from the 70s with his shock rock kind of. He was one of the pioneers with that. And he's carried the torch throughout. And him more than ever, he's always had a revolving carousel of top-notch musicians in his band, and always hot girl guitarists that have gone on their own that have played. Your girl Nita Strauss, Arante, a couple other people. So Alice Cooper is definitely in the wing of metal.
Yeah, and Ted, you mentioned younger bands. So Vernomatic just mentioned Nita Strauss. She's a young shredder, heavy metal. She has her own solo album that just came out, which I think is incredible, but no vocals in it. And I actually had a chance to talk to her when I was at the show, after the show, and I said, would you ever consider getting a vocalist? She said she would, which would be really interesting. So I think she's one of those up-and-comers that could really create her own identity and brand, which she's already doing. And then we saw another band called Kor Rozik that opened for Nita Strauss, that they got a cool, like, kind of almost a little bit of an Alice Cooper theatrical vibe, but definitely old school heavy metal. And I think Kor Rozik's doing really well on social media because he's always on Facebook almost like every other day. And it seems like his followers in this quarantine is just growing because I think he's kind of real and genuine. And so he said they're writing new music too. So there is some flicker of young band hope out there, and they're all connected to the old guy. You know, like you said, the old schoolers like Alice Cooper.
Well, I'm going to bring up Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy, I never understood his music, to be honest with you. You know, I'm saying lyrically because it's kind of like he slurred his words to me. I can't get past some of that stuff. But what's your opinion of Ozzy? I mean, I would love to know.
Well, Vernomatic, we haven't talked about Ozzy as much. It's interesting you said that, Ted, because that was going to be one of my suggestions. But for me, Ozzy is, and again, it's even more apparent if you just kind of listen back. I mean, clearly, you know, he's always known for his guitarists and guitar players. And Randy Rhoads, most metalheads would say he was by far one of the best. And unfortunately, he departed too young and too early, because it would have been incredible to see how he progressed. I mean, just some of the greatest heavy metal riffs of all time, for sure. And then Gus G, actually, who was one of the guitarists, he's not in the band current moment, but he had this thing where he was just riffing out on some old stuff, and it just blows you away. So Jakey Lee, Zakk Wylde, but he's got, you know, the revolving door lineup. But I think that's what he's most known for. And then, of course, there's some catchy tunes. And he even went, you know, you could argue he's commercial in some ways, but and then, you know, he went out, you know, he had all the crazy stuff that he used to do at the shows, like the head of a bat off and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, Ozzy has his definite place. He's definitely in the, you know, top 10 of, you know, metal. Obviously his Sabbath roots, you know.
Right.
I don't know. I personally, you know, if you just go back and listen to Diary of Madman, for example, or Bark at the Moon, like, if you love guitar riffage, there's like none better. And I think that's what the new album's kind of lacking, actually. It's okay. It's good. It's catchy. Elton John's in one of the songs. But there's no shredding guitars, really. I don't know, Vernomatic, if you want to add to that.
Let's just say Ozzy's been very fortunate to be associated with a lot of talented people, and he's reaped the benefits of all those people. In Black Sabbath, Geezer Butler wrote all the lyrics, and Tony Iommi wrote all the music. And those classic classic Ozzy albums, two gentlemen got screwed out of a lot of royalty. Lee Kerslake and the other guy's name escapes me. But Ozzy's been very fortunate. He's, like I said, he's been surrounded with a lot of people. And here's a heavy metal fun fact. One of Ozzy's biggest songs, Mama, I'm Coming Home.
Yeah.
Lemmy from Motorhead wrote it.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And this new Ozzy album, I don't need my Ozzy Osbourne, in no disrespect to Post Malone, because it's he's doing, it's his generation, and a lot of people enjoy his music. But I don't need Ozzy gravy training off Post Malone's Rising Star to get on the Grammys and get all that. It's unnecessary. I don't need Ozzy doing music with Elton John. And I love Elton John. That's my take on Ozzy. Just
it's funny.
Retire already. And you talk about who stayed at the show too long, Ted. Yeah. 1992, he had his first farewell tour. And that goes for Kiss too. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well,
roll it up.
It's funny the way you said that. And gravy train, you should have just said crazy train. You know, you should have just said that. It would have been a great little segue there, or whatever you want to call it. So back here to some of these, what they're saying here. Linnell said she brought up Lita Ford was awesome. She loved Lita Ford. And that's a name you don't hear very often anymore either.
Speaking of Ozzy, she did an Ozzy song, obviously.
Well, Lita Ford was a casualty of COVID this spring. We had a press request to get with her when she was coming to town in end of March, and the show got canceled. So Lita Ford's still releasing stuff, still touring. And
I must admit, I don't know as much Lita Ford stuff other than some of the popular songs that she may have had on MTV or the Ozzy song. It would be good to maybe hear some of her stuff. The other female metal artist that I really liked was Doro, man. Like, I've seen her live, and her albums are solid, and she's definitely metal. Like, she looks, I don't know how old she is or whatever, but she's definitely still rocking. And anyway, she's another one of those female bands that I think really keep carrying a torch.
I just saw a young girl. I think she won, or she was on like America's Got Talent or something, and she was heavy metal. Real young girl in her, I don't know, 19 or something like that. But I'll have to see if I can find it and send it to you. But she's a rocker, and the voice on her reminded me of Lita Ford. I mean, she was just really ripping this stuff apart. I'll have to see if I can find it and get her name too. I didn't even think about it till you guys. Well,
one other, not to get too off tangent on this one, but when you talk about younger bands, there is a station called Liquid Metal on Sirius XM Radio that Jose Mangan hosts, and that's where they do try to play younger, aggressive, up and coming bands. But the other thing that's kind of missing, because a lot of what we were just talking about, like Ozzy and Queensryche and Dio, are great metal singers, vocalists that have incredible range and melodic. A lot of the young bands now are just like that screaming death growl vocals, and I personally like some of that, like with Children of Bottom and Butcher Babies, and there's a place for it. But I do feel like when you listen to the Dirty Dozen or the Devil's Dozen, like the top 12, it's all the same, like metalcore almost, like in a way. And I guess that's another thing that needs to happen, because it's the singer equally as with the music, and that also seems, for whatever reason, I don't know why, like maybe it was because like a band like Hatebreed got successful, or I just don't know what it is. But again, it's got its place, but
you know what it is, Mark?
That's something that's lacking, I think, in my opinion.
You know what it is? You're not 22.
Yeah, maybe. But the point is, I like it and I get it. I just don't think it has to be all of it. That's my point.
I get what you're saying, but it's, think about 30 years ago when Metallica was crunching it, and Metallica and Slayer were the heaviest things ever. There was older guys that were into Zeppelin and stuff that were like, oh, that stuff's it's just too fucking loud. It's just too fucking violent and stuff. And you can't even hear them sing. Just counterpoint.
Petra, never heard of them. Have no idea.
Petra, coming from the religious rock circles. They were a Christian band.
Oh, okay. All right. Say, I'm learning. You guys are learning me some shit. So just for the fun.
Clubs, sheds, arenas, stadiums. This is On the Road, your compass for live metal concerts.
So what's up with that?
There is no road.
On the road.
The road.
So, Ted, I don't know if you know this, but a late night Twitter rant, not even a rant. I just was posting up, probably had a couple of beers before, that I tweeted out to Richie Faulkner and Jane Andrews from Judas Priest, and I made the comment that a lot of pro sports are talking about playing without fans and playing in closed arenas and stadiums. And I was like, well, hey, would a band like Judas Priest ever consider, instead of going to a big arena where you got all the production and lots of lights and probably really expensive, maybe going into a club environment, shooting a live stream show, maybe they do it as a pay-per-view kind of thing. And, would that be something that music could look at, metal music or any music, I guess? And anyway, Richie Faulkner tweeted back, and then it ended up being a headline on Blabbermouth the other day, which is the heavy metal, news wire. And I didn't mean to turn to a headline kind of thing, but it started the conversation of, hey, could even though there's no on the road right now and no bands touring in the short term, like that could never be a long term solution, because going to live shows is part of what makes the whole metal community thing work. But I would personally think it'd be really cool. Like, I think it'd be awesome to see a big band in a cool club venue, live streamed. They can talk between songs. Maybe do it as a fundraiser. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what your opinion is, or Vernomatic.
Well, I know that, like, right now, I mean, because of Talk with Teddy, with this show being a variety show, I look at everything on social media because I'm looking for ideas to bring to the show.
Yeah.
And a lot of bands, a lot of musicians are doing this whole thing on Facebook or Instagram where they're playing, like an hour, and they're putting up a Venmo. So the musicians are out there doing this stuff. They are performing, but I don't think it's like heavy metal. I think it's more of like the country or the pop. Actually, May Hernan is Irish, and they're doing little concerts from their living room, and I think it's very cool. So myself, I'm all for it. I think stuff like that, if it's a way for them to perform and play and get their music out there as a reminder, I think they should do it.
Yeah, and I agree. But a lot of them are doing stuff from their living rooms or their basements, or solo performances. Like Matt, the lead singer and guitarist from Trivium, has been doing that. But I'm saying where it would be kind of a production situation. It would be like you feel like you're at a real live show, and
right.
Yeah,
that
so I agree
cool.
with anything that these bands could do to keep content and keep it fresh and new. I think
that would be cool.
Really cool. Now, financially, it's always going to come down to finances, I'm sure, like everything. Yeah. But it'd be cool. I don't know, Vernomatic, I don't know if you have an opinion on that or not, or you think.
No, I'm not gonna. I'll watch. I'm not gonna put any money in some Venmo or a virtual tip jar.
Right.
No,
I get it, but some of these musicians are sitting back there not being able to do concerts, so that's why they're doing it. So I understand why. It's one of those things that they don't have money coming in or whatever. So instead of because they can't go to clubs to play, so they're at home doing it.
I'm not gonna go on this soapbox, but I can't work either.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? It's hit up the government like everyone else is. I don't know if I can tell you.
All right, so this is a question that I guess the best way to put it is, when you go to these concerts, like the older, the bands that you heard from the 80s and you're watching them now, do you, when you were first watching them, I'm sure you got goosebumps and the hair stood up on your arms and all that stuff when you first saw them. Do you still get that when you watch these guys 20 years later?
30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, it's no different than if you run into an old friend that you haven't seen in 35 years. You may see them every 5 years. It's the same thing. If I go see Judas Priest, I'm like, fuck yeah. All right, I'm seeing Priest, and I may go see him. We may go see them 2 or 3 times in an 18-month period because they're here touring. Right. Because you never know when they're going to come back. My favorite band's Van Halen. I'll go see them anytime, any place. Metallica, I did 4 shows last tour because these bands are like old friends. And so you ask, do you get goosebumps? It's like, yeah, it's like I want to go see them. I'm emotionally invested in these people like you are invested in an old friend.
And Vernomatic, that's a good point, because, and sometimes, Ted, in a weird way, sometimes it's even more so because there's a couple things that are happening all at the same time. It's like you're stoked to see him live again and hear all different songs maybe you haven't heard in forever. You're drawn in on the nostalgia because you are just automatically, it kind of takes you back to when you were, younger, and these bands were coming, and you're remembering about what that was like, and different songs at different times of the set list will take you back to those moments. And then you're also thinking, hey, maybe appreciate it more, because, like, to Vernomatic's point, like, you don't know if they're going to come back, or you don't know if they're going to tour again, or you don't know if they're, like, again, Judas Priest, Glenn Tipton, the guitarist, isn't doing well health-wise, or there was a tour where it looked like they call it the Epitaph Tour, and we thought they were done, or how many farewell tours there were. So, like, So you're appreciating the moment more because you don't know if that moment's going to be there anymore. So
Right.
I think it's sometimes more powerful because of all those factors.
So here's a question: Hagar or Roth, John and Mark?
Chanel, you were batting 1,000. Okay, you were batting 1,000 for you to even post that question.
That's fire or ice. See, I'm going to disagree with Vernomatic though because I love look. I know what Roth did, but you can't argue with the commercial success of what Hagar did. And
That's
I
Van
think
Hagar. That's Van Hagar.
5150. That's one of the
Van
greatest albums ever written. Huh?
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
I just saw Roth do a live performance, and it was terrible.
Oh, really?
It was terrible. He couldn't remember the words. It was more like he was fighting to get the words out, screaming. It was.
We don't have a long enough show to cover that.
Yeah, well, I'm
that
just
a
saying
Vegas show?
it totally just destroyed my image of Roth, David Lee. Just totally destroyed it.
Last time I saw
Verno's taking his headphones off. That can't be good.
Vernomatic.
Don't be mad.
Oh boy. You
Don't
lost
be
him,
mad.
Ted. Good job. You dished on his boy, apparently. He's back. All right.
Uh-oh.
All right, we'll
Don't
change
go-
subjects.
Don't
We'll
go
change
away. Don't go away
Is
mad.
this the image you were thinking? Is this the David Lee Roth you love? 1980. Eddie smoking a bean. Dave
Yeah,
Jack.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
get that with Van Hagar. This is Van Hagar.
If I don't
70s
have a
Turkey
segment
tequila.
like this in my show where somebody does something like that, it would be boring. I loved it. It was great. It's great.
Now, in defense, there is some there's some quality stuff that they did with Van Hagar, but Van Halen was it was magic. This was Van Halen. This was, and no, they were never heavy metal.
So that kind of brings up a question for me because back when I was a kid, you always heard that old stereotype. If you were listening to heavy metal, it was devil music. But
Did you talk to my mom just today?
No,
She still
But-
says that.
really? I mean,
Tell her we only worship the devil on Fridays, though. That's it. So it's okay.
Oh, okay. But I know it was one of those things that if you listen to that music, you were, labeled, that's devil's music. You shouldn't be listening to it. Blah blah blah. But you two turned out okay.
You think?
It's,
Skeletons in every closet. Huh? So look, it didn't help that bands like so there were, and this goes back to that cool tree of heavy metal, whatever. Look, there were bands like Venom, that like they were satanic heavy metal, and they talked about it. And I remember, like, mentioned to my buddy Scott Batiste back in the day, like he had a whole bunch of these kind of albums. Iron Maiden had a devil on the front of their Number of the Beast album, and
It had the pentagram upside down, and they had, there was a lot of
Fire
bands
did.
dead.
Yeah, and part of that for me did intimidate me, by the way, because I was not exactly sure if that's the Satanism side of things was part of what I wanted to get into. Then again, though, a band like Stryper comes out and they're Christian rock and metal, and actually I would consider them metal. But for me, it always comes back to the music, right? The messaging in the middle. You may or may not agree, but do you like the music? So I was less into the satanic stuff, and I don't know all the bands from that kind of genre of metal, but it did kind of go with it. And I think some of the bands, honestly, I think they probably really weren't, but they played into it because it kind of made it cool and made it like part of what metal was, I guess.
That's exactly it. And a lot of it's imagery, like we were talking about. I tease the Lakeshore Record Exchange series that's going to be running on Metal Mayhem ROC. But you bring up Venom, the record store, Lakeshore Records, they had a Buffalo location, and back in '85 they had Venom do a in-store, and even Ron Stein said after the in-store, the lead guy bought an Aerosmith, cassettes, and it's just even Slayer. They wrote about Angel of Death, all that stuff, Hell Awaits. Even Jeff Hanneman, that wrote all that stuff, said, listen, it's just something to write about. I think it just goes into the imagery of it. It sells. Iron Maiden, a huge band, and a lot of it is all what they do. It's better than having like a just purple album with Deep Purple on it.
Yeah. I think some purposely didn't deny it just for the reason.
Chanel.
You're gonna fight Chanel, I think, John.
I won't fight her. So did I answer your question, Chanel? You asked Roth or Hagar. What's your answer?
I'm gonna go get some Cabo Wabo right now. Drink it in front of John.
Yeah, that would be great. You know what? I think I'm gonna make seeing that I don't have one of the business cards. I'm gonna make a decision here. Let's extend Chanel to do tonight's Mount Rushmore. Mark, what think should she do?
How about she just gives us her top? We'll go with Mount Rushmore of heavy metal CDs, like discs, whatever you want to call them, albums.
Yeah. Okay.
Bands, albums. So
Ted, hit the music.
Oh, the Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Mount Rushmore. Here we go.
Many have tried, most have failed, only a few survived. This is the Mount Rushmore of metal.
Many have tried and most have failed. That's the best.
This is your homework, Chanel. We're going to give you, we got half an hour left of the show. We're going to give you 10 minutes to come up with your 4 Mount Rushmore metal CDs. All time. Your top 4 all time. Okay? So at quarter to 1, we want your answers. God, I'm demanding tonight.
Yeah, look, she's like, I need Hagar tequila more than him singing. LOL. Well,
are you drinking a brew dog there, or what do you got going there? I noticed you're drinking something.
Who, me?
No, Ted.
I'm
yeah.
drinking. I'm just drinking Coke. But John, here's a surprise for you. Here's Chanel.
Hey, Chanel. Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Are you doing your homework?
No, because he pulled me in here too fast.
I think you're going to fire me, and I'm being replaced officially. Vernomatic's kicking me out now.
Well, the more the merrier.
You have a new co-host. So we asked you for the Mount Rushmore of your favorite metal CDs.
My favorite.
Top 4.
Top 4?
Yeah.
Top 4.
You can think about it for 15 minutes.
Yeah, I gave you 15 minutes to think about it. This shouldn't be rushed.
Well, my favorite is usually like the old school stuff. Like I love Nightmare from Alice Cooper. I love. I can see the album. I have short-term memory loss. Give me a second. Too much headbanging. Alice Cooper and I love Dawkins.
Take your time. Take your time.
Well, right now I haven't found anything I like since 2004 of this genre. I mean, I loved when Blackie Lawless did Crimson Idol in I think 2000.
Headless Cross and
yeah. I love his whole story in the beginning of the album, how the gypsy and going to see the fortune teller. I think that's pretty awesome. And you go into the music and it flows with the storyline. That's kind of old school. I am not okay. I like Van Halen. I love Van Halen. I am not a Sammy Hagar fan. I love his tequila. Now I can live happily ever after with his tequila. He doesn't need to sing.
Sammy's a good guy. It's just
he is. He's just not Van Halen.
I know.
I think what made Sammy Hagar so popular is when he did the soundtrack to that movie with
Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Well, after that one, the one with
Heavy Metal.
Yeah. He did one of the cartoon movies off of that, but he did that thing with Sylvester Stallone, the one where Over the Top.
Oh, the arm wrestling movie?
Yeah, that's when he really took off in this area because everybody rushed to see that stupid movie, which I'm not kidding, was a stupid movie. But the music in it was like 4 of their songs. So
It's spammy.
well, I'm not a Sammy fan. I'm sorry. I like his tequila.
Me too. It's good.
Well, I figured I would bring her up and on here so that you two. I mean, John said that you were batting 1,000 until you said that. So with Sammy.
Well, I just didn't know.
Well, that's a foul ball because she's all wrong.
He didn't tell you what I wrote before that, though. See, I wrote a statement before that and then asked the question.
You did.
Yeah, go back and look.
Here's a Vernomatic.
Is that the one about Winger? Is that the one about Winger?
No, it was before. It was after Winger. The comment about Winger and Warrant. Most of those were ruined by Beavis and Butthead.
Oh my god.
Yeah, because what I'm seeing is Petra, then I'm seeing Warrant and Winger, and then I'm seeing the Hagar and Roth.
Then you missed me saying about the tequila then, because that was my response when he said something.
Okay, tequila was after Hagar and Roth. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. But
okay.
Thanks, Chanel, thanks for coming up here. Thanks for joining these guys for a second. I thought it was fun to have you pop in here since you were giving them a lot. You were the one saying the most out there between you and Linnell, so
Linnell's a rocker.
Cool.
I love her, man.
Yeah, keep it heavy, hon. Keep it heavy.
There you go. All right, Chanel. We'll talk soon, honey. Thank you.
For joining us.
Yeah, it was great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
But I just thought that was fun, to get on there with that. So, I have another one here. Which one is this one?
What's new? What's fresh? Now, streaming for vengeance.
That is what we're listening to, or we can also call it reading for vengeance, because Vernomatic's been doing some reading during this time. So we that's where we kind of talk about what we're streaming right now, and I guess it gets thin sometimes when it comes to fresh new stuff going out there. So I go, this is when you really go back in the vaults, during these kind of crazy times. Actually, I did listen to one the other night. I listened to Scorpion Savage Amusement, another one that you could say maybe they're not metal, but that was actually pretty good. That was a pretty good album, I thought. And then I listened to some Fight the other night. Like, that was Rob Halford between when he left Priest, and he was like really gritty and really heavy, man. Like, that first album was really heavy. So I listened to that. I don't know, Vernomatic, you got anything else in your iPad?
Actually, to tell you the truth, I've been engulfed in learning all this. I got a new computer and learning the audio editing file, the process. So that's all I've been doing, and it's not like I could do that and listen to tunes. And I haven't been working as much, and I do a lot of my listening in the car or at my headquarters, either getting ready for the day or getting done with the day.
Right.
So I've been spending a lot of time at home, not really. But at night, I still do my audiobooks. And I'm redoing the Ted Templeman, the producer of the Van Halen albums, because I'm hoping to get the author on the podcast in the next month. So I'm brushing up on it.
So I'm going to ask you guys, so if you could go back and meet a musician that has passed, who would it be?
Ooh.
That's a good one. The good news for me is I had a chance to meet Dio. Met him only once. It was before he went on stage at a Maiden show. And it was one of those random things where I happened to be backstage with the Maiden guys, and I actually had an old school badge on, and he just happened to be standing there right before we went on stage. I think he thought I was a roadie, and nobody else was around, no security. I thought I was going to get bum rushed. And he was drinking a glass of wine, and I Just he said he still gets nervous before he goes on stage, so 2 or 3 glasses of wine helped him out. That was like a cool chance moment. I would have. I don't think I ever met Lemmy. I think it'd be. I always wanted to go to like the Rainbow and see him play in that slot machine and just go up and have a beer with him and just shoot the shit. Like that would be really super cool. And I think it'd been really cool to meet and hang with Randy Rhoads. I guess they would be mine.
I've never met Theo. I just came up with a great Mount Rushmore for us. But if I were to meet someone that has passed, I think it would be Bon Scott.
See, I would have picked that too.
Bon Scott, because I listened. When I say I read his book, but I listened to it. The Bonfire book, whatever it's recently, I did it in December. And Bon Scott it would be Bon Scott. I guess Randy.
You guys got to admit though, it would be cool to go to the Rainbow, see Lemmy playing his little slot machine and pulling up next to him on a bar stool.
Here's a fun fact: I did meet Lemmy. Me and my buddy, we rode our bikes to the House of Guitars. Me and Chuck Mercado. And to get the new Aerosmith album, it was like in 1982 or 80. It was August of 82. We go there to get it, and Motorhead was there doing an in-store appearance because they were playing the Riverboat that night, Another Perfect Day tour. And I didn't go to the concert, but I got his autograph, and it was the first time I met him. And then I saw him in concert a couple times at the arcade, and he did the same thing he does at the Rainbow. Ted, if you don't know, the Rainbow's a rock and roll club in Los Angeles, part of the Sunset Strip. The legendary, there's 4 or 5 legendary bars. And Lemmy Kilmister, the late lead guy of Motorhead, lived like right down the street, and he always had the corner table or the corner stool with the corner punch digital poker, the trivia little sliding things. Now he sat there and drank rum and cokes. They have a statue outside the Rainbow for him now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So. Man o' War. Never heard of it.
Man Ted, of your 20 questions, how many we've gotten through so far? Because I know we've been bouncing around. I'm sure some popped up as we were getting some feedback.
I think some of them. I think you got the majority of them because they kind of mixed together a little bit the way you guys were answering. So I'm pretty good with that. But I do have another one. It's like your take on the metal that's coming up for the future, like these new bands that you guys were mentioning earlier. Where do you see this going? Do you think metal will come back around again at any time? Will it be mainstream?
I mean, my answer to that is, one, I sure hope so. I really do.
I hope so.
I think just bands in general, it's getting harder and harder, I think, to be big arena acts. It seems like these days the only thing that's really selling out there is pop music, and it's probably because of radio airplay still. And I just don't know if that metal is ever going to get there. Although, then again, you look at bands like Iron Maiden who sell out all the time without any radio airplay whatsoever, any kind of media support. But I am of the belief, I don't think it's an old school genre. I don't think it's nostalgic. It really bothers me when it's somehow labeled now as what do they call it? Oldies stations. Like, how's that music oldies? Like, I think there's kids like Vernomatic and I and Ted, like all of us, whatever that was that connected us to that music. I think there's always going to be a percent of the population that the music resonates with, that country music and every other one and pop just doesn't do it. That's why I think there is a huge opportunity for a young, hungry, aggressive, kick-ass band, or bands plural, to put out fresh, kick-ass new metal. And I think there's a market for it. And that's just my opinion, and we'll see.
I think with the events of the last few months, the health climate now, I think that the big tours and that is a thing of the past for at least a few years. And maybe now there's a in for scaled down kind of tours, like smaller bands can achieve some more success on a smaller scale. That big arena stuff are days past. It's just kids aren't picking up guitars like they used to. They're not playing rock and roll that leads to metal like they used to. It's it's hip hop, it's dance, it's top 40, it's everything's auto-tuned, and
auto-tuned.
It's not how it used to be. And like even Gene Simmons says, and Dave Grohl says, those garage bands aren't happening anymore. Sure, there are still some, but even guitar companies are going out of business because people aren't buying guitars. You know, how sad is that? So I hope that everything that happens, things mellow out a little bit and get back to how it should be. Maybe, we don't need stadium concerts. That's
but that's stated though. Look, those metal festivals that are happening in Europe are still really well attended. It started coming to America, like with the M3 festivals and the Chicago Open Air and the one in North Carolina. I mean, and sometimes they're molding a whole bunch of different kinds of genres of like the rock metal into it, and they usually get one of the old school, old flag bands to kind of carry the torch on the headliner, and then they bring a whole bunch of other ones. I mean, there is that audience. I think also, if you do circle around YouTube, there are some young shredders on there that are playing. It's just they got to connect with the right other musicians to put this together. Like, there's that band Lilac that people talk about. They're younger. They do a lot of cover stuff. I mean, I don't know if they've recorded any of their original stuff yet, but I think there's some. But yeah, I think this would be maybe a weird time, or maybe there is a resurgence. And maybe look with people that are having a difficult time financially, or everything economically,
right.
Being downtrodden a little bit, losing their jobs. Like, anger and aggression does a lot for metal. Like, Priest would say, it was born in the steel mills of England, man. With the Birmingham, with smoke and fire, and maybe that feels some metal energy.
Well, you're right on that. But my take on the smaller shows was going with not big crowds. Maybe, I don't know. But these young people have to go to shows. They're not going to shows. It's not in their fabric because it's different. It's expensive. There's not as many of them.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I think that's with all types of music. I mean, especially now with what's happening around the world. I think in some ways that maybe after this is all said and done, maybe the opportunities will be there for the younger bands to kind of kick into gear and say, hey, I've got something fresh. I got something new. Maybe you guys should give me a chance. And I guess there's always a possibility. I am going to throw in here that Linnell was playing the game alongside of Chanel, and she said Ace of Spades and Motorhead, Metallica and Justice for All, Metallica, Masters of Puppets, and Ozzy Bark at the Moon, and Judas Priest Painkiller.
All of them are great releases.
So that's what she
it's hard to argue with any of those. I would put Master over And Justice. That's just me. And for some reason, when And Justice first came out, I didn't like it as much. I kind of thought it was a weird departure for Metallica. But then when you look back at that, it was actually a really heavy album, and songs like Blacken and Harvester of Sorrow. And so I cannot argue with her list.
And Chanel added Dimebag.
Yeah.
You know who Dimebag Darrell is, Ted?
Not a clue.
He was the guitarist of Pantera, and he was.
I know the name Pantera, but I don't know.
The band broke up. Him and his brother, they were the bass player, or the drummer and the guitarist, and he was shot dead on stage.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Probably at the prime of his career too. Actually, he was probably at the height of his popularity, and a lot of people would say Dimebag and Zakk Wylde, kind of get thrown in that Randy Rhoads of like great metal guitarists, and unfortunately, I think his brother passed away not too long ago as well.
So I know we only have about 15 minutes left, but I'm really curious. I don't know if you both would agree or whatever, but I kind of would like to know, what do you think the biggest misconception of heavy metal has been?
John, you want to take that?
Yeah, biggest misconception is lower class of people, uneducated, and just troublemakers and deviants, devil worshippers, all the cliches that you think are complete opposite. It's 180. One thing that the metal community has is a brotherhood. It's you're a metalhead. Think about it. It's this is a quick funny story. My kids give me shit about it. I have sons that are in their 20s now, but we'll say we're walking through the mall. My God, show my age. Say we're walking through the supermarket, and I see some stranger I don't even know, and they have an Iron Maiden shirt on. I will stop, talk to the dude for two reasons. One, to make sure he's worthy to have that Maiden shirt on, and two, because it's like, all right, you got a Maiden shirt on. You know, instantly you have that connection. And if someone's walking around with a Maiden shirt on, it means they're into Maiden. It represents them. That nothing irks me more when I see someone walking around with a Miami Dolphin hat on, and I'm a big Dolphin fan, and I do the same thing. I go, oh, Finn fan. And they're like, no, I just like the colors. I go, well, then get a teal hat. So the community of metalheads, it's like Mark and I, for example, you know, years ago, you know, I always thought he was a cool dude, but you know, the metal has bonded us, and it's for the sake of metal.
Yeah, Verno, I mean, he answered that as spot on as you can, in the sense that, and again, I tease about my mom and stuff, because, you know, these are the things she would always say, like, you know, there's this misconception that it's, you know, the devil worshiping thing, you know, drugs, you know, alcohol, excess, like, you know, dredges of society, you know, lower class, non-educated people that Mark are probably going to steal and rob from you if you're not careful, you know, like there's like that gritty, you know, and what I try to tell, like, to Vernomatic's point, like, you know, to me, I find it, the reality is it's so opposite, like the most genuine, down to earth, non-pretentious. I've been around a lot. Look, I've been around a lot of suits in Wall Street and corporate folks. I would take metalheads over half of those phonies any day of the week, candidly, like, for me. And there's something real about it. And to Vernomatic's point, it is like, you feel like it's a brotherhood, man. You feel it's like a community that you really feel like you're a part of. And it's part of the music. And same thing, like, you know, my daughters are embarrassed every damn time I see a dude with an Ice shirt or, you know, Priest or Motor. I'm like, hey, dude, yeah, freaking right on, man. You know, Priest, you know, like, and they're always going to give you the fans. You know, a lot of times you stop in the aisle of wherever you're at, and you end up talking for 15 minutes about the shows. And to me, it's
trading numbers, and then you got a buddy.
Yeah, like I met a guy on a freaking Tour de Teddy bike ride around Cuca Lake, and the dude had a Maiden shirt on, and I went right over to him. Turns out he loves soccer. He loves Maiden. We talked for 30 minutes, connect on Facebook. Now he's like tagging my stuff. Like, yeah. So to me, those are the misconceptions that I really, you know, that's another reason why I even started that whole Metal Forever thing. And I wanted to change that to say, look, there's the most genuine, down to earth. And I would say the musicians and the artists, you know, Grant, you're going to have some of your prima donnas and guys that are just, you know, dickheads per se, whatever. But the vast majority are just, every time you get a chance to meet them, talk to them, connect with them, great people, genuine, down to earth. Like, it's pretty cool. And that's why I'm always happy. For me, like, I'm so happy I found this music. Like, I'm so happy it's part of what, you know, makes me of who I am and stuff. Like, I wouldn't want to be a fan of any other genre. Like, it's
not at all. Not at all.
And you know,
like the fabric of who you are. Yeah.
Some of the things you brought up, I mean, I remember to myself, it's like that was categories kind of killed a lot of things back in the day. That was label, and we still have them today. But if you were a metalhead, if you were into that stuff, you know, everybody was saying sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all that stuff. And they were always saying, oh, well, you know, this singer from this band, you know, devil worshiping, they're back in the back room, there's orgies going on, they're smoking their pot, they're doing up their drugs and blah, blah, blah. But what people overlooked was, even in the country market, they were drinking themselves to death, they were doing the heroin, they were popping pills, they were doing all that stuff too, but they didn't get the shit that metalheads got, because I think it was the look, that the shock value of their look is what kind of, threw them in that category. And I have to throw something up here from Chanel. She's still going to town over here, by the way. She says, they don't know how hard we fought for our rights to party with metal, LOL. I think how much shit went through after Twisted Sister D. Schneider was attacked by the Christians attacked us back in the 90s. So,
the
that-
PMRC and censorship and all that craziness. Yeah, that went with the whole genre.
And
Yeah.
Eric Harrison is saying here, I seen someone wearing a Slayer shirt at the mall, asked him what was their favorite song, and stuff he didn't know anything about Slayer. He was just wearing it for Retro Day.
Eric Harrison, that is a whole nother subject. And that, when Kim or one of those Kardashian clams is walking around with a Slayer shirt on, the best was when they had a Slayer shirt on and the guitarist of Slayer had a shirt on that said "Kill the Kardashians." Said to her,
there's a pictures with Rihanna with, I think, a Judas Priest shirt on. I know Lady Gaga performed with Metallica. Some of these pop stars are closet metalheads, I guess, but some are phonies. Like you said.
Lady Gaga's a metalhead. But when Kanye West is wearing a shirt that says a Testament shirt,
right,
and he didn't know it was the band Testament. He thought it was like, the biblical Testament.
Religious? Yeah.
And Ted, to answer your question, yeah, that does happen in rock and roll. The drinking and debauchery.
Well, yeah, some of it does, but John, like I said, it happened in country, and that anybody, even live performances, whether you're a opera singer or Broadway or whatever, I've seen that on both ends, where they're in the back room and they're shooting up or they're taking drugs and doing acid and all that other stuff. I think it's look at some of the greats. I mean, between Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis and or Jerry Lewis and all these other guys. I mean, there was stuff going on that we never saw from behind the scenes that didn't come out until after they had passed.
All of them, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, it just goes and goes and goes into today. And,
one of my favorite singers from way back when, and of course now I'm gonna forget her name because I'm thinking about it.
Janis Joplin.
Yes, Janis Joplin. I mean, she was doing so many different drugs at a time, just to get through to perform. And she admitted that half the time she doesn't even remember what she sang. She's lucky she even remembered. It was all on automatic,
It exists in the pro sports world. It exists in pop music. Amy Winehouse, remember? She had an issue, and it's Hollywood. Come on, partying and excess in Hollywood. Come on. I mean, it's not fair that it gets pegged on metal music.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I was sticking up for metal. That I think it was just one of those big misconceptions.
Ted, are you familiar with the 27 Club? All the people that have died at 27. Janis Joplin,
yes, I have. I did. Yes, I did.
Hendrix, Morrison, Kurt Cobain, and but that one doesn't count when you.
Kurt Cobain. I just whatever. But Cheryl Sanders. Here's one that I haven't seen tonight. She says my brother-in-law plays nothing but heavy metal. Well,
tell them about our show. You can come hang with us anytime.
Yeah, there you go. Cheryl Sanders, we love her brother-in-law. Cheryl Sanders should be jamming metal.
There you go. Nick is saying that I try to perform as much heavy metal as I can at karaoke parties with my paranormal family. Many of them metalheads themselves. It's like my way of showing loyalty and commitment to them. That's pretty cool.
All right. Hey, Nick.
Hard to find heavy metal karaoke, by the way, but there are some YouTube karaoke stuff out there if you search it up. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So,
if you're that's nice for us. We can do a heavy metal karaoke night. That'd be kind of fun, actually.
Yeah.
Now, which one of you can sing, though?
Oh, no, I'm not saying us. That would be for you.
Well, that wouldn't be fair.
Yeah. You can do Breaking the Law. That's about it.
Breaking the what?
Breaking the law.
How many words in that one?
Drugs and sex are like music. It's there and always will be. Sounds make a person open and vulnerable.
True.
guys, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on here and hanging out with me. You taught me a few things. I learned from you guys. I admire your show. I really do. It's one that I have posted on my own personal page from time to time because you talked about something that I was interested in. I love music, and I really don't have a favorite, to be honest with you. I listen to everything, and I've seen that from a lot of our people in the chat room that they really just don't have one favorite. For me, per se, it's the song, like when I was listening as a kid, whatever song that came across that just sparked an interest in me, I listened to it. Like, but this is hokey, but My Sharona, I love that song, so I listened to it over and over and over, Eldonova Fantasy, one of my favorite songs.
It's an MTV song. You sure
Well,
you didn't have MTV?
Yeah, I did have MTV later on, but it was,
okay.
But yeah, there was some things that, I think, was it Motley Crue that had a song about girls? I think, yeah, girls.
Girls.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's like, who would figure I would listen to it, but I did. And, but yeah, there was certain songs, there were certain things, but AC/DC was definitely my top band. There's a gentleman in the paranormal field that I had met. He was somebody that I looked up to. I happened to had a chance to meet him in Gettysburg, I think it was, and we got talking. And he's a metalhead, a huge metalhead, and I had no clue. And he was also a police officer and a huge metalhead. So we were talking, and he had, I think it was a Duncan hat, I think he had on. And he was talking with somebody else about metal, and I walked up and I said, I don't know a whole lot about metal, but I love AC/DC. He goes, that's one of the forefathers of heavy metal.
AC/DC, there.
I said, I didn't realize, I just love their music. That's all I knew. So.
Well, the name AC/DC, it leans towards it.
Really? I never knew what it meant. I just thought it was like,
No, well, it has the big lightning bolt in the middle.
Oh, okay. All right.
AC power. And if you knew anything, not ripping on you, but if you knew anything about the band, they have albums High Voltage.
Well, yeah, I get all that, but I didn't realize that it was that way. I just liked them for the music. I didn't care, what they were classified as.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
AC/DC is just hard rock.
Yeah, I loved them.
Ted, it's interesting because I've got two young daughters, and I listen to my fair share of Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande from time to time. Throw on a little Johnny Coltrane here and there. Listen to some Goo Goo Dolls, U2, Dave Matthews Band. I mean, so I do listen to other forms of music, and I've been to other forms of shows. Like, I think going to Dave Matthews shows is like one of the coolest experiences, just live, vibe. But for me, no matter what, and I can listen to that stuff for a little while. But I always end up just coming right back to metal. Like that's like the thing. That's like the magnet that.
Well, like Dave Matthews Band, you mentioned that, and it's like I love Dave Matthews Band. He had some songs that I really liked, and Goo Goo Dolls, U2. I mean, there was so many of them that I listened to the music because I liked a certain song. It wasn't anything specific as a genre. So. I think there's more people like me, I hope, that just kind of like the good song and they just enjoyed the song. And if they're into a certain genre, that's cool. You
like what you like, and we respect that.
Yeah.
You're an honorary metal brother in our eyes.
Yeah, you did great, man. You were definitely more educated than I thought going in. So, maybe like you said, if you learned, you gained appreciation. Maybe you go listen to some stuff you didn't think about, and who knows? Maybe you get a little more turned on to the genre in general.
So,
well, as long as it's not that screaming like da, 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 somebody screaming, I'm okay. I mean, that's that. I really I turned it off. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I was trying to think. God, I'm gonna screw this up. But like with my band that I played with a lot, there was a song. I think the name of the song was One.
Metallica.
It's like I could listen to that, But anything else, I had a hard time figuring out what the name of the song was or whatever. But the guys in the band would be jamming this stuff, and I'm like, why aren't you guys a rock band? But they're playing country. So, but they love that stuff, and I'd always fuck up the names all the time. They're like, "Oh, you mean this one?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know, what it's called. I just know that I liked it." But I came from like you guys did. I came from a place where the music that I heard in my household, I came from a father that was Irish, Roman Catholic, and the music he listened to was not the stuff from the day, like what I was raised on. But my mother was different. My mother listened to Elvis Presley. She listened to Captain and Tennille. She listened to all these other types of music, and she was the one that really brought me to respecting music, I guess, and liking what I like, And but there's a lot of different bands, a lot of different music out there I love, and I don't think I can actually put it in a certain category for me. It's just music. I guess that's the best way to put it.
All right.
So, but guys, I'm going to do this for you because I have it right here, and I thought it would be cool to have
Our exit. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate it.
That was cool.
ROC. Check out our websites at metalmayhemroc.com and metalforever.com for information on upcoming concerts, podcasts, archives, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone. Catch us next time on WLFE DB Radio.
You guys are
Thanks,
just thank you for being here. I knew we'd have a good time because we never really got time to sit and talk, up at the station, and I didn't want you guys to think that I was, some weird. I am weird, but anyways, I didn't want you to think that I was, too far out weird. But it is what it is. But I enjoy all that different music and stuff, and right now I listen to a lot of like Flogging Molly, a lot of like I was saying to John earlier. I'm really into the alternative stuff more than I am anything else, and I love it. And the world music.
Well, here's a parting metal fact: the lead singer of Flogging Molly, David King.
Yeah.
30 years ago, he was the lead singer of Fastway, and Fastway was formed by Fast Eddie Clark. That was the guitarist of Motorhead. He left Motorhead to make Fastway.
No kidding. See, yeah. I didn't know that either.
So Metal Forever Mark's banger metal tree.
Yeah.
Works.
Wow.
It works.
All right, man.
I
gotta hit the men's room, but thanks, Ted. Appreciate it.
That was
all
fun.
right, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man. Be safe. All right, guys. We'll do this. We'll talk soon, man. All right,
we'll do this again sometime if you'd like to. That'd be
fun.
great if you guys want to come
2
back.
hours went by with that for sure.
All right,
man. Thank
Be
you.
safe, guys.
Thanks,
Vernomatic,
guys.
see you soon. Thanks, Ted.
Talk to
Thanks.
you. See ya, Mark.
Yeah. Bye. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me here for another episode of Talk with Teddy. I had a really good time with these guys. I don't get a chance. I've never had the chance to really sit down and talk to these guys, and it was awesome for me. And if any of my friends are still hanging around out there and would love to chat about stuff like that, please, follow up on them. Again, you can check them out on metalforever.com or metalmayhemroc.com. Check them out. They're on Facebook. They're on all that stuff. And they're just, you saw them. They're great guys, so feel free to reach out to them. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you about music. They're really into it. So am I, just a whole big mix, but it's a great thing. I'm just going to throw this out there that Talk with Teddy is, we're not going every night anymore. We are going down to Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Other things are happening here, so I have to kind of make some changes, but we're still going to be around with Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday nights. We're going to be here at 11 o'clock, maybe 10. I might change that so that more people can come in and enjoy this variety podcast, because I like to talk about everything and anything. And speaking of that, I'm going to leave you guys with a quick little thing that I'm doing, and some people have reached out to me about it. I am taking a trip in July, and I hope that some of you will reach out to me so that I can give you some more information. Take a listen, and watch this. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ted Vanson Jr., and I am a huge John Wayne fan. A Quiet Man, which was one of his iconic movies, was shot and filmed in Ireland. Well, let me tell you something, folks. I'm inviting you to join me in Ireland. And before you say you can't afford it, yes, you can. The company that I am doing this with is called MysteriousAdventureTours.com. I want you to email them. Check out their website, but email them at MysteriousAdventureTours@gmail.com. They have installment plans where you can put so much away to go to this trip until it's paid for. You have a whole year to do it, because we're going June 15th through the 23rd, 2021. Summer solstice. Amazing. Ireland, summer solstice? What's better than that? Ah, wait. I told you what was better. It's a quiet man's journey. We're going to the locations where they filmed The Quiet Man. That's amazing, right? Folks, you can afford this trip. Again, contact MysteriousAdventureTours.com. All right? Shortly, a video is going to be coming up here after me, and I would like you to watch it, check out the information at the end, and do yourself a favor and contact them. Join me in 2021 for the summer solstice and for A Quiet Man's Journey. We'll see you there. All right, guys, one more time, I want to say thank you so much for joining me here, and to John, the Vernomatic Verno, and Forever Metal Mark. Don't say that 3 times fast. But I want to thank those guys again for joining me here on Talk with Teddy. And thank you so much for sticking around and having all that fun with us. I really do appreciate it. Just so everybody knows that Tuesday night, we actually have Mr. Tony DeVille from DeVille Inc. He was also on Ink Masters Angels. He will be joining us here Tuesday night. And then again, we'll have Mr. Cliff Cameron also joining us. And so what that means is that you guys have to pick a topic for us, and those two are going to discuss it. And we'll see if they have all the right stuff to make that happen. Right now on Wednesday night, I do not have a show. I'm not sure yet what we're going to do about that. I'm not sure if we're going to have it, but we may just throw them together. But Thursday night, we have one of the Dead City Collective clowns, or actors, I should say, performers, horror performers that are going to be here, and have a special co-host, Miss Jade DeVour will be here as well, and she will be co-hosting that show, and I'm looking forward to that show a lot. So guys, please make sure you come back and check it out and hang out with us. And on Friday night, we are going to have the singer-songwriter Johnny Bauer with us on Friday night. So make sure you guys check that out. Here's the ending. But guys, remember, stay safe, look out for each other, and take care of everybody you can. All right? See ya. Thank you and my guests for joining me here on Talk with Teddy. Tune in tomorrow night when we get to do this all over again. Be safe and look out for one another. Don't forget that Talk with Teddy is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So please go and subscribe. Thank you.